concerns. This is the only area that we have.
Right.
The rest of it's out of our jurisdiction. Yep, all right. So can I have a motion to close the public hearing
Make a motion to close.
for
Public hearing for Reed Street.
Reed Street? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we are going to write orders after we finish having hearings, and by next week, they should be out to you.
Okay.
There's nothing, you know, like the other project that had 1 million, additional pieces. This is easy peasy, so,
Under 100 would be great.
yeah. And so that's it, really.
Okay,
Thank you. Yeah,
excellent.
thank you.
So I'll just be in touch with you, check in with you next Wednesday. Is it Wednesday and Thursday usually have hours?
Yes. Corinne's hours are Wednesday and Thursday from 9 to noon,
Okay.
and we should have information to her, but she needs, you know, we go back and forth, you know, making sure, so at least by next Thursday.
Okay,
They should probably, you know, unless there's a snowstorm preventing us to go to, you know.
sure. And since, I know you closed the public hearing, but since you, since the last meeting was prior to the planning board, I know you mentioned wanting a copy of the, these little renderings that we provided, so I don't think the planning board provided them, but if you'd like, I could leave you one.
Oh, yeah,
It's
that
not
would be
new
great.
information, it's just
Yeah.
a pretty picture if you'd like.
Sure,
I
and
have
we
a
can
copy.
add it to the file, and that would be great.
There you go.
All right.
Oh, right, we talked about the line of sight.
The LiDAR, the 3D
So how do you
scan.
do this? I mean, are you just using,
So the LiDAR is attached to like an 8-foot drone, and it'll fly at 150 meters, and it'll send down millions of points. And at the same time, it's also collecting images. So we use the points to create a surface and collect, you know, tree heights and everything else. But they can colorize those millions of points, and essentially they can take out the area of tree clearing for our project and put in our 3D modules. And so with that, they could, in a viewer, from different elevations, different perspectives, kind of take screenshots. And since they're tough to figure out where the road is, I went ahead and marked it up for ease of viewing with like a key sheet on the front. But
oh, I see, okay.
so it helps show that the actual tree heights and vegetation, that's what it's gonna look like when this project's built. So this isn't just a rendering, this is an actual 3D model of actual
Right.
data.
Well, this is great.
All right, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I gotta beat Barry back.
Say that again?
Barry's in Auburn, which is only 15 minutes from where he's at. I told him I was gonna get back before him.
You will.
His meeting is at 7:30.
You never have.
Thank you very much. Have a
All
good
right,
night.
thank
See
you.
ya. Very good size.
This is here. All right, next one is, okay.
Oh, you mean like putting in,
All right, which one is that?
back covers after the.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're using the drone for this?
80-pound left Picked up a small child.
No, that's one, so he's really scientist. Here's the stuff that we need to get back to you.
I can reverse it these days.
I need to give you stuff back. Put the files away officially. that on this stuff?
There's streets, that's.
Okay.
All right, let's start.
Send it over. And Walker and Myers. Were you able to get the report for Tim?
For which one?
Tim for the Lucy Stone?
He's not here yet.
No, not the report. Were you able to get from Madeline the financial report for Tim?
Not yet.
Okay,
No, I got.
because I know that he asked for that. I don't know if he
Yep,
asked.
no, I did not get that yet. I
Okay.
have to get to Madeline's office tomorrow. But we'll get that done too.
And is this our?
Yes.
Still got it. We have 5 minutes. Okay. March, April, May. Our fiscal year ends at June 31st or June 1st?
No, it's the 31st.
31st, I think July 1st is.
July
started.
1st is the new fiscal year, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
I'm just gonna make it for your hours.
I was talking to Kathy or something, and they're upping her hours, the board, with all the solar stuff coming in. So she didn't know if maybe you wanted to put in more hours, which.
Well, we usually don't use this many hours, even last year and the year before, we didn't have
Exactly.
as much solar. So as part of this, the learning curve,
Mhm.
you were working longer hours than you were supposed to be
Right.
originally, but I don't know that you'll need it for too much longer, so we'll see.
Mhm.
When do I need my finance? What am I?
They were doing theirs as soon as possible. I've got the memo here somewhere.
Okay.
It's right here. Because we also have to get that annual report in, which I'm working on, right here, the budget. That's why she thought it was urgent to get done. It's next Friday.
Oh.
But I already started pulling stuff for the report.
I usually just give them the same thing. We'll talk about that after, okay? That is good, all
But she
right.
did bring that up and said to figure that out.
Figure it out, all right. Unfortunately. And then the annual report you've been looking at,
I've been working on it, pulling some of the information, which I have here to review some.
okay, so we'll do that after.
But I didn't get all the information.
Yeah, we have a lot to give you. at least between Richard and I. Some estimated dates and quite a bit.
I submitted the bills and now entertainment for your thing that we're going to, so that should all be paid.
Okay, that's good.
Those are all submitted.
I
Registered
know,
and submitted.
huh? We did it
never
early
done
this
this.
year, I know, and
She
then
said
Rachel's
it's paid,
going
so-
to. We've never done that. We're always like the skin of our chin. We're gonna be happy, we get to go in a different line and everything.
Yeah.
Did you, and you know the classes that you're taking?
Yes.
He's
coming
taking the
home
same
before
one,
midnight.
you and Rachel are going together.
So are there new ones for you, or are you,
Yes, there's new ones for me.
on both sessions?
Yes,
Oh,
and then it'll complete the certification.
and then you can start going to the fun ones.
Yes.
Well,
Well, they're a little more fun, but, exactly. All right, it is time to open up the public hearing for Cutler Road. Let's,
I had it for you guys.
go right here.
Just finished my.
Okay, all set?
Yep, all set.
All right, for the record, Nick Bassandola, O-Level Design Group. Here on behalf of the applicant, with me is the applicant's representative, Mr. Pedro Rodriguez. We're here with a notice of intent, Lot 4, Cutler Road, extension, ground-mounted solar project. Based on our last meeting and input from the commission, we've submitted revised plans which hopefully address the concerns raised at the previous meeting. Went through a couple of those, made some additional changes to the erosion control notes as we talked about, with adding the filter fabric to the temporary swales. I kind of highlighted the area with the temporary basins. So add some areas that would show if, if we did need to include additional basins, temporary sediment basins.
Yep,
One could be included in this area, one could go further down, so we have possible locations for additional sediment basins. Kind of highlighted the note here, if required, go through this calculation, but hopefully I'll get a phone call from
Right.
the contractor and we kind of work through it in the field. With regards to the stormwater basin and groundwater separation, so I redesigned that. And also provide a cross-section right to the center of it to show, we're 2 feet away from seasonal high groundwater in all spots through the center of the basin. And then as far as, buffer zone disturbance and the commission's unwritten policy of staying outside of the 75-foot buffer zone. I did this additional plan, which details what we talked about at the meeting, saying you'd allow us to disturb up to 25% of the area within that 50 to 75-foot zone. I went through, highlighted these areas, showing where we're disturbing, showing the total area within that zone, and then I gave you the calculation, and we're pretty much right at it. The only place, I kept a little bit of clearing up in this section just to provide enough tree cutting
yep,
for, so sun can hit those panels, but the rest is the same amount of disturbance. I kind of kicked the system in, we got rid of 4 solar panel racks, which hold about 30 panels each in these last 4 rows. So I kind of kicked this over, regraded the swale, redid the basin, and pulled the driveway in a little bit to kind of get those disturbances outside of the 75-foot buffer zone as much as possible and stay within that 25% threshold that we spoke about at the last meeting. I think that pretty much covers everything we talked about.
tell me about the basin, it looks smaller.
Correct, yes.
And is it, so how did you go from a larger to smaller basin and still have it work? Do you have new stormwater numbers?
Everything was sent to the town's consultant engineer, and I'm pretty sure they,
Well,
Do you have any
he, actually,
questions with
the
that?
town's consultant engineer sent us something based on, things that were sent to him on the 10th. So we didn't get anything new from, they just received it, but the last,
that's the letter I gave you guys from the
no, this is what I got
last
from the
meeting.
planning
From
board.
the planning board, yeah.
We
Yeah,
didn't
they
get a
gave
letter
it
from
to
you
us.
guys from Graves.
I don't think I don't think this board requested any,
No, we didn't, but
Review
you just said,
Graves.
this is the letter I gave you guys. What
well,
did-
no, at the last meeting, I had that letter that was sent to the planning board that showed that they.
This letter wasn't sent at the last meeting we had because
Oh, okay.
They just,
they got it the day
they
we got
just
these plans.
received this, they just received this
Can I
a
see
week ago,
the
yeah.
letter? Thanks.
It's not really comprehensive, so.
Mhm.
'Cause there was some question.
So when you said at our meeting that Graves had approved everything, they hadn't even given planning board.
They've looked at the stormwater, so this is dated January 24th.
Right.
Mhm.
Based on things that they received
Mhm.
by the, I think it was the 10th, the 4th, the plans that were
Correct, yeah.
January 4th.
So this set addresses these items.
Well, on the plans from January 4th have the old basin.
From January 4th. Yeah, so this plan set addresses the Graves items that were in
But
this
that
letter
wasn't Graves'
previous.
But that wasn't Graves' item, that was our item. Those were our
No,
items.
but I know, I understand that. I haven't seen, did you get anything from planning board?
I think the question is,
Well, we just-
if you rerun the stormwater calcs with this base,
I did, yes.
Okay, so Graves will have to look at that because he hasn't seen the new basins. So did you, there's really nothing to look at. Here, let me,
I'm just, I mean.
seriously.
This letter seems.
Like it's missing some
So you
information,
have,
a lot of stuff.
like a lot of stuff?
no.
The day I went in to pick up these plans,
Correct.
the day you guys dropped them off, and when I went to see the planning was in there, I said, what the hell's going on with the stormwater review? Because you questioned us, you said that it didn't matter that you were below the groundwater because the town's
No, I
engineer
didn't say
reviewed
it
it.
didn't matter. I
And
said
so
it
I
was
said,
reviewed by.
I said, what the hell's going on with Graves?
Consulting engineer.
And he said, well, Graves hasn't reviewed that, we haven't gotten anything back yet on this plan. And then Kathy said, oh, wait, we just got the email just now. And that's when the email,
You got the email, that's
that's when
dated-
she got the email.
But that's
the
dated
date-
February, January
I don't know,
24th.
if
When's that
that's the
dated?
one.
This is when we received it.
So the day I went and got
Correct.
these plans,
I
that's when
received
she
that letter the
downloaded it.
same day, and it was pretty much the day that we had our meeting, correct?
Right, so the bottom line is that
The
this
bottom line
doesn't
is,
cover.
this addresses those items. We haven't received an updated,
No, but he hasn't seen this.
Jeff has these plans. He hasn't sent a revised letter.
Okay,
Saying
right.
everything's been addressed.
Right.
I got
okay.
that letter for West Brookfield. Jeffrey, as far as, just so you know, that stormwater report for West Brookfield, reviewed by Graves Engineering, the same exact stormwater report, had everything addressed. That's what I was referring to at the previous meeting.
Okay,
So-
well,
so
we're not really concerned with
Warren and West
Brookfield.
Brookfield aren't getting separate stormwater reports. They get one stormwater report for all 4 lots, because it's one large area.
Right.
We're looking at it as one large stormwater analysis.
Right.
So
No, I
what I'm
understand
saying
that.
is, I don't know if Jeff has issued a final letter, but all those items were addressed, and I got a final letter for West Brookfield, which had those same exact topics that said everything was, other than the Town of Warren zoning bylaw issues, the first 4 items. Everything else was exactly the same
Okay.
in the
that's-
letter. But I mean, you don't have that information, I'm
What
passing
I'm
it on to
telling
you.
you is that Graves hasn't seen this yet, and so we just,
They haven't. I don't know if, I don't know.
He
they were-
has.
Correct.
You've
They-
given
I
him this.
physically dropped this
okay.
revised plan off to Graves a few days after I issued the plan on the 24th, because I was gonna issue the plan, I was gonna bring, then I made a few extra modifications to include this revised basin, and then brought the stuff to him on the following Monday. That letter was issued on a Thursday, he got the stuff on that following Monday.
So let's get
Nonetheless,
back to the basin. The question
yes.
about the basin
Correct.
is, how can it be smaller now? Was it oversized before?
It was, yeah, it was oversized, that's correct.
And now, is it still oversized a little bit, or
No, it's pretty much as big as it can be, based on,
forget about the physical requirements?
Squeezing it
Is it gonna
into-
handle the water
it can handle
that's going into
correct,
the
it can
basin?
handle the water, yes.
How many, as a percentage, how much smaller is this?
How much smaller is the basin? I don't have that number off the top of my head, I can't
Can
tell
you
you.
get that? I mean, it's tremendous, it's a dramatic number. Right?
As far, no, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't call it dramatic.
Well, the bottom of the basin is what, I don't have my ruler with me, but it's like 30 feet long, 40 feet long by that little triangle, that's.
Correct, so what,
Before you had a basin
so
of like
before,
60 by 80
before what the basin
or,
was,
it was a big, big rectangle,
it
like a
was,
pan.
it was less deep, flatter at the bottom, but the problem you had with that was, you're
Well, I
saying
didn't
we were
have
cutting into the 2-foot groundwater separation. So I followed the existing contour, made it deeper, as you can see on the profile, kind of followed that
Yeah, but
existing grade.
By making it deep, it's not deeper though, is it?
Yeah, it's deeper. It's
The
deeper
walls
than it
are
was
higher, but
before.
where's the outlet?
The outlet?
It's still at the bottom,
There's still two
It's
outlets
still at the
right here.
bottom, right?
Correct, there's two outlets.
so it's not deeper. I mean, the drain's at the bottom. You know, I mean, you can make a bathtub this tall, if the plug's open,
Well-
they're both gonna drain the same,
Eh,
right?
It's gonna hold more water though.
Correct, capacity.
Yeah, it has.
Don't get me wrong, it's a little bit smaller, but when I did all this, now, remember, I added this basin, but before there was only one basin here.
Right.
So
This,
before, all this water was going to a big swale that kind of, it all got into the swale that caught all this. So before, I had that oversized basin. I put this other basin and I said, all right, well, I'm just gonna leave that one oversized because it can fit, not a big deal, but then we had to modify things. So this basin was already oversized to begin with after I installed this basin.
as long as it's big enough.
Correct.
You know,
The
that's,
calculations prove it out, and I'm 100% confident when Jeff sends his revised letter to the planning board that you received, that you'll have no issues with the basin as designed. But like I said, it was oversized on the previous set after I installed this basin. I didn't want it, it was a, kind of like a redundancy, and, what's the point of regrading and redoing this entire area if I don't have to, if I know the basin's big enough, it's gonna provide additional capacity. But we had to go through, pull some stuff out of the buffer zone, kick things over a little bit, regrade it. It did get smaller, but pre and post development wise, flow wise, we're not exceeding the pre-existing condition with this smaller basin.
So one of the things, looking through the stormwater report, that we have concern with is that when you finish your site, it still hasn't been determined whether you're going to put mulch down or seed. You guys have mulch on your plan. That is, on your stormwater report, you say because there's no pavement, there will be no, so it opted out of,
We're not required to provide any infiltration.
water
It's all-
quality and recharge.
Correct. ground
So just, let me
infiltration.
finish my question.
Yes.
So we have a site that is going to be stabilized, and then there's going to be lots of time when the chips are degrading and there's going to be open, it's going to be open ground, which will allow the sediment to go into the water, which will go into the basin, which will go out of the basin because there's no place for it to settle, there's no sump, there's no settling because the pipe is at the bottom. How are you gonna deal with any solids that are picked up from water coming over ground that isn't stabilized and grassed?
So these three pipes,
Up 6 inches.
they're about 1.5 feet, 13 inches, plus or minus, the lowest one. So the bottom of the basin's 844, so I got,
This
oh,
one,
I got a
44.5,
840,
so 6 inches, right?
845, 3, oh, 845, 6, 8, and I have
844.5,
840, where are you saying 844, 5?
one of the lower ones on the right. Invert in 844.5, out 844.1.
Okay, so half a foot for that
So
one
you
pipe.
got 6 inches, so
Yeah,
you got
that's-
6 inches of
Right, we
settling
have
in that
6
little
inch-
triangle.
Yeah, and an 8-inch pipe. So back to your concern. Final cover is gonna be determined by planning board,
Yeah.
whether it's grass.
Okay, so
Whether
even if you
it's-
have grass, there will be open, they're still gonna be open.
We understand
It's
that.
never 100%.
And so to address that, we have a maintenance plan, whether it's wood chips or grass, the site's gonna be maintained. So for wood chips, as we like to describe, as the wood chips are placed down, what we prefer, the wood chips, as the wood chips begin to degrade, any areas that are degrading, it's kind of turning into topsoil, they'll go in and seed those areas as needed over time. If the area is seeded and we're seeing areas of concentrated erosion in certain areas where if you're gonna see channelized flow from runoff from these areas, that will be addressed, those areas will be raked out and those areas will be stabilized. You know, the site is inspected, it is maintained on a what?
We have, we write it with reports that will be submitted to the Conservation Commission, that is probably somewhere.
You mean the maintenance plan?
We submit, we.
Well, no, that's after construction.
No, after construction, we can easily, if the town wants, we've done it with other towns before, we can submit maintenance reports.
Monthly, bi-weekly.
However you guys feel comfortable, we can put as a condition.
Yeah.
Right.
Because these guys they have no problem with, you know, sending in inspection reports. They do have personnel, they contract a maintenance crew that will go out there and inspect the site, mostly for, you know, mechanical items, but they're gonna go through
We use
and,
the landscaping.
you know, go through, check the landscaping,
concern is
drive
on-
the perimeter road,
On
and
this
inspect the
basin, you're
basins.
so close to the wetlands, the concern is meeting the water quality standard with the water that go into the wetlands, that's the biggest concern.
No, we understand
You know
that.
what I mean?
No, there's no
And-
problem with
and,
that.
I mean, according to the stormwater, you're supposed to submit a report with to show how you're gonna meet the water quality standard, so it's not gonna affect the wetlands and all that, right?
I don't know what you're talking about with regards to that statement. If you have a pervious area, an impervious area, you're required to treat for total suspended solids removal. We don't have impervious area, therefore we're not required to provide a calculated value for water quality from runoff from impervious areas. So, you know, TSS removal, you hit 80% TSS removal typically is when you're
So-
doing a parking lot.
But this is, I mean, the stormwater standards are really not designed for these large earthwork. They're designed for parking lots and malls and things that have sewers. This is a whole new animal, and so what we're saying is that you have this open space, you're gonna put panels on it, and despite the fact that you're calling the panels pervious, we all know that they're not, and that it changes the way the water behaves. And then the water dumps off the panels and it rushes down the hill, and it's going to pick up, there's a good chance there's gonna be rutting, and it's gonna pick up anything that isn't secure. So it's gonna pick up solids, and it's gonna end up in the basin, and then it's just gonna flow out the bottom unless you have a settling pool of some kind. And so we just wanna make sure that that happens and nothing ends up going into the wetlands.
I mean, for this site, I'd say 80% of this flow is gonna enter these swales prior to entering the basin.
Right.
And you can see here, even on this one, after we talked about having the water run over the gravel access driveway. So on this side, I came in, I put a catch basin that has a sump. I mean, if you guys want to see something of that nature on this side, I can provide that. So water comes down the swale, goes into the catch basin grate, you know, double grate catch basin. It's got a 4-foot sump. You'll get some settling in that. and then that goes into the stormwater basin. I can add a second one to that side if you prefer.
I didn't know if you wanted to see a copy of the law, the code.
No, I'm-
It's required
familiar.
documentation, including computations for each stormwater standard, this is a mass standard. This is what's required for document compliance.
Correct, but we don't have any impervious area with regards to providing water quality.
It says applicants must demonstrate there are no untreated discharges. New discharges are adequately treated. Applicants, this is no untreated discharges or erosion into a wetland.
Correct,
So,
for water quality purposes, with
Right.
regards to TSS removal, with regards to
sedimentation.
impervious cover. I'm not gonna argue back and forth with you. The consulting engineer who does this all the time too, who's a licensed professional, did not even mention that concern. I've done 5 of
There's a
these
lot of things
sites.
they didn't mention.
We have never had that issue before on any of these sites, so.
Well, conversely, there has never been, out of the 16 applications that we've received for solar projects, every single one of them has addressed removing of solids. They have never just crossed it out and said, just because we don't have pavement, just because there are surfaces that. So they try to address, all right, what's gonna happen with the solids, the dirt, the sediment, what's gonna happen? And it should not move and get into the wetlands. Everybody's addressed it.
We agree.
You are the only one who hasn't addressed it. So we're asking you said you would put in a sump or something, if
We have
that
one on
will.
this side, I can add a second to this side if that's
So
preferred. I can-
What is on that? Say that again.
A deep catch basin
A catch, okay, a
with,
sump.
with a 4-foot sump, hood,
Do you have one already that I'm not seeing?
one right here, yes.
This one.
That's
And this one
kinda,
right here.
so yeah, that's reflective to the talk we had about the
But this-
water coming down the
water coming
swale.
here,
Okay.
We didn't want it to go over
The road.
the road.
Right,
Right.
okay.
So like I said, I can add one to this area right through
here.
here. And if you prefer, we could do some extra grading that kind of sheds the water that way.
I mean,
To
the
this way, to this
concern
side?
is, I mean, if you do the wood chips, we're more concerned than if it's vegetated, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so if you guys, if planning's saying, no, we're not gonna accept the wood chips, then
We'll
it probably
vegetate.
wouldn't be an issue, you know what I mean? That's the issue.
We understand, I mean, like I said, we prefer the wood chips. We feel that it stabilizes the site quicker and it's easier maintenance. But if the planning board chooses, seed,
If it feels, if the committee feels more comfortable that we see this lot, we have no problem doing it also. We, in our
It's not our, I mean,
It's not our call. I think I would probably, because for the short term, it may make sense, but to me, it doesn't make sense
I
just
mean, the wood
to.
chips
we can-
are more immediate, I
We'll
agree.
propose,
Right,
You know, I
but,
mean, the wood chips are fantastic immediate.
but then you have all of
But
this
Over time, they don't last.
water
That's
rushing
fine.
off the
Right.
panels onto wood chips. How
Right.
long is that gonna last?
I agree.
further, we will propose that to the planning board to add as a condition that we will add vegetation.
yeah, I mean, if you guys wanna put a written recommendation, so the planning board's aware of that, I mean, we'll be
It's
happy to
on the record.
convey that to them. And we'll make the change if that's what you're looking for.
Okay. So the next question is about the water that comes out and the amount of water that comes out. And are you required to calculate recharge, which again is something that you didn't have to include because you have pervious panels? But ultimately, the water is coming, it's being funneled into a swale, there's no more trees to pull up the water, there's no more root systems. The whole environment has changed. There's a lot of water that's gonna go in there, and there's a lot of water that is being diverted out those two pipes. Then what happens to it? Is there infiltration? What type of soils are there? Is the water going to go into the ground, or is it going to stay on the surface and end up just filling the wetland area?
Well, the site, as you are probably aware, that majority of this whole hill, C and D soils, other than the big knoll further up in West Brookfield. So
Yeah.
there's most of the runoff on the property is surface runoff, so that's all gonna be, continue to be surface runoff along its natural path. That's what these outlets are doing in this area. Will the basin have some infiltration? yes, I didn't even attempt to take any credit for it because, like I said, these are all C&D soils. It's, you know, it would skew the stormwater numbers to have, so I'd have to have a smaller size basin if I did include infiltration. So none of these basins include any infiltration. So these are,
But they will be.
but they
empty
will
in
infiltrate.
72
Yeah, we're
hours.
not going to put an impervious barrier down or anything.
No, but you're gonna meet the 72-hour requirement?
Correct. Yeah, I mean that's why we have the
I mean,
basin.
do you have a calculation on that?
That's
or-
why we have outlets so far at the bottom that they are. So you know.
But do you have, I mean, did you do an infiltration test to know what the soil actually is, so you know if they will be?
Well, we did.
So you didn't calculate the 72 hours on them?
Can I finish?
Yeah.
We did the deep hole testing. Based on that testing, we take the soil classification, we get an infiltration rate through the Rawls table, and we get an infiltration rate that way. We don't go out and do a perk test. But yes, this basin will dewater that bottom 6 inches within 72 hours.
Because it's just leaving out the pipe,
Well, the 6
Mostly,
inches
yeah.
in there.
Mostly.
Correct, yes.
except for the 6, oh, I see, except for the 6 inches. So, you know, when you did the soils tests just say there's just texture, but you have,
Well, that's how you get the, you
yeah, but
use what's
sandy
called.
loam is like that giant section. It could be clay sandy loam over here, it could be, you
There's
know,
no,
depending on where.
there's no clay out there. What you do is you use the
More
stormwater handbook.
compact, more compact, okay, it's more
And you
compact,
get what's called the Rawls rate, which is the accepted way. You go out and do a textural analysis.
right?
I'm a soil evaluator, so I go out and we dig the hole, we get into the sea layer, I go, all right, well, this is a loamy sand, sandy loam.
Yeah, but
And then-
loamy, was it compacted or not compacted, doesn't that make a difference? If it's a little bit more tightly packed and there's loose sandy loam and there's,
As far as the Rawls rate, it does not make a difference with,
so what makes it
Achieving
C&D
that value.
soils versus,
well, the C&D soils is what's mapped on the.
yeah, I know, I understand,
soil
but what would
maps.
make something, less able to
A D soil,
infiltrate?
you typically see that classification when you have a high bedrock. So you have a shallow layer of material, say 6, 8 feet, and then you have refusal below
Okay.
that. So in some places more further up in West Brookfield, I did find refusal at 7, 8 feet based on the logs I provided in the stormwater report up through there. Over here, we were able to dig down. We had a large excavator. There were some large rocks, but we were able to get down at least 10 feet in those areas.
And you went with modeling instead of, and you're saying the modeling was higher than the observed groundwater?
Correct, on I think all but one of the test holes.
36 inches?
It just happened to be, I think where we were digging might have been an area that was affected by tree clearing activities where they were pulling some large rocks out or something, because the soil was a mashup, it didn't look right. So we came down and dug another hole further down, but for the most part, yeah. We did it at the peak of this unseasonably high precipitation this year. I mean, it was wet when we were out there, it was raining when I was out there. So,
I'm just a little shocked because I've done a lot of work up there. And I mean, I'm not, I know you said, I trust you're the engineer, what I mean, but typically we find high water around 18 inches up there. Everywhere I've worked and the septics I put in, it's all been around 18 inches, that's all.
okay.
But I find it a little shocked, that's all.
I mean, if they get out there and they start digging the basin and groundwater's higher, we'll be back here for a requested modification, or we'll have to reduce the size of the system. I mean, we designed it based on the test hole that we dug, and we didn't excavate the entire basin. When you get out there and you do your inspections, if things don't look right, I'm not gonna let the contractor put the basin in groundwater, because once he's gone,
Yeah.
it's my problem.
Your problem, right?
So I'm gonna be out there, I mean, I know
Are
you
you gonna
guys,
be
I
inspecting
know you
it?
guys don't like my answers in the
No,
stormwater
that's-
report, but, like, I'm not gonna let this basin be installed in groundwater. I
Are
mean,
you
it's just-
gonna inspect it for them?
Correct, I will be.
You were gonna do a final inspection?
I'll be doing inspections
Oh, okay.
during, I make
One
it
of the projects.
required that I'm out there when they excavate the bottom. dig out the basin, I wanna come see it, don't start
Well, I'm a
filling
little
it
more
in
comfortable now.
until, I mean, I require that if I do, subsurface infiltration systems and parking lots, dig the hole, I wanna come see it. And typically, Graves Engineering will also come out and inspect those, because those are where you get in trouble, that's where you get,
Well, they haven't been
we
in the
have
past,
issues.
that's been some of the problems.
no. Especially, I mean, a site like this, high groundwater, where things could change from when you dig your test pit here, it could be different over here, it could be different over there, I mean, we don't know. If the system has to get smaller to modify the basin as we move forward, and based on the final excavation of the hole, I mean, we're gonna make it smaller, they're gonna have to lose the tray panels to push it in further, but, based on the information we have, that I feel comfortable with this design. And if you wanna write in a condition that I have to provide a report once it's excavated, I'll be there anyway, so please include that.
We'll probably include having somebody there to watch with you.
Oh, okay.
It's more likely.
Yeah, no, I mean, some towns have the consulting engineer do the inspections for bottom of hole, things of that nature, but if, you guys wanna come out, that's fine.
Yeah, we'll have somebody. We'll have somebody. So again, getting back to the water, once it leaves,
Correct.
you're assuming that all of that water should just stay on the surface and eventually, like, where does it go?
It eventually makes its way to the wetland, that's where all this water goes today. So these are gonna kind of travel down this path and eventually make it into this wetland down through here, which travels down. I believe this eventually hits a tributary, which kind of goes down the hill and then ties into that large pond
I can't remember.
further down.
So, right now, there's trees that are helping consume the water,
Mhm.
and when they're gone, there will be more water. So it's, again, we have concerns. Are we going to expand this wetland now we're putting so much water into it?
I mean, the wetland may be expanding after this past seasonal rainfall, but
Sure.
and that's what we take into account
Yep.
when we do the stormwater analysis. So you have a curve number for the existing land cover, then you have a proposed curve number, which takes into account there's gonna be no trees, and DEP prefers a curve number, I believe it's in the 70-71 range, which is classified as meadow. So,
Right.
no trees, short grass growth, so that curve number is designed to account for those items.
Sure.
And that's, we're using TR 55, which is the way that we are required to prepare these stormwater reports for our analysis.
We are over our time, and I just need to check in with you guys. Are you okay?
I think so.
All right, thank you. And do you have any more questions? Concerns? Do we need more information? Are we good? So I like the idea of adding another sump.
Not a problem?
Because we do have concerns with that. And then, is there anything else?
I mean, another thing I can do, just to work on that same train of thought, I'll put some stone check dams in these swales.
Right, okay.
So, say every 75 to 100 feet, small check dam, about a foot and a half deep. So water hits the check dam, probably be stone, or what I like to use are those, gabion baskets. So
Yeah.
those metal baskets that you fill up with stone, they have a nice flat top to them. So we can, we embed those into the swale. So water hits that, it filters through slowly, and if, you know, you do have a lot of water coming through, it'll just kind of overtop like a weir. So, you know, kind of stick a few of those kind of coming down through here and in this swale also, because these are set to be grass swales, so we can add those easily if that's a concern of the commission, and add the additional deep sump catch basin right through there. So.
And then one final, and I suppose this is a consideration for everything. It only looks like the elevation of the angle of the pipe is 2 inches from top to bottom, the invert, right? It's about, is that right?
They're 1%.
Oh, it's,
what I.
yeah, I mean, so it's super shallow. I guess the velocity of water coming out of that.
Yeah, well, I did that
would
on
be-
purpose, so,
Yeah,
and I wanna have, I don't wanna have, you
No,
don't
I
wanna
know,
have.
I know, I
stupid-
understand, so I was we've seen some crazy things in the past, and I just, you know, there isn't going to be a need to put something in front of it to stop the water, that, you know,
No.
okay.
I mean, you know, if there's a concern with that, what I typically would have contractors do would be, you know, they have the pipe outlet, so then go about 8 to 10 feet, you know, riprap, and then do like a mounded pile of riprap, kind of like a half moon, and then
Oh, yeah.
the water kind of has to filter through that, or same thing as the, you know, the gabion there, the check dam,
Yeah.
kind of has to go out through and it'll kind of spread it out a little bit more. We can add a few of those.
No, if you think it's.
I mean, they don't hurt. I mean, if it's a concern, it's
They're not gonna-
it's a little bit of extra
Go
stone.
shooting out of there like a
No,
cannon.
not like the other ones.
Okay. All right, so that ultimately I think is it, unless you have any more. Okay,
Very good.
all right,
So,
buttons.
can we get a recommendation to go on to the next planning board meeting based off of these small items?
We can write them a letter saying that we're at a spot where we're only looking for 1 or 2 things, and that's it. Yes, we can do that.
Which we will include when we go to the planning board.
Yeah.
If we,
Yes.
so now, one question. During our last meeting, you mentioned that you were gonna write a letter to the planning board recommending that we can move forward with lot 3.
I did today. I'm sorry. But they do have that. Was it today or yesterday?
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, we respectfully request if we could get that letter in, because we're on for March.
Yeah,
Send me a letter and remind me, send me an email.
Pedro will do that, he's the emailer.
The only reason why we ask is
Yes,
because
and I will try to do it tomorrow, but send me an email. If you send me an email, and I will just like,
I would.
I'll just do that. I sometimes need reminders.
Can we get
Yeah,
this?
What, oh, yeah. And before, you guys owe us some money.
Sure. What is
The
it?
2-week grants.
It's for the newspaper, enclosed copies of 2 ads for the Worcester Telegram.
Sure, I mean, I thought we paid both of them.
So, no, okay.
No, we did not get that.
So you can get that to them.
This was,
So, for the record,
Yeah,
extra catch basin, deep sump, hooded catch basin,
thank you.
check dams.
Yeah.
this
Is there
this was
anything
the
else?
letter that went out.
That's all I have up here. I'm just making sure.
And copies of the ads are
That's
attached
it?
as well.
All right.
Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wait to hopefully get a final letter from Graves in case we have to change anything else.
That's a good idea.
And then I'll send you guys a final plan. But as long as, because I know we're gonna have a few meetings with planning board, so we're not.
When's your next meeting with planning?
We're meeting March 11th.
Oh, okay, all right. We've got some time, all right.
Should I make a check to the town of Warren?
Town of,
Oh, did we, so we pay and they pay you?
it has to be Town of Warren, if it's made out to the commission.
No, so we pay, you've already paid for it.
Yes.
The town of Warren has paid for it,
The
okay.
Town of Warren paid for it, this is to reimburse the town.
Okay,
But they can't do anything if it doesn't say town.
yep. Okay. Okay. Stormwater book. We have O.
Should we set up?
Go ahead, please set up. All right, can I have a motion to continue the public hearing for Cutler Road extension to 7:15 on the March later. What is it? March 13th.
Motion to continue the Cutler Road extension to March 13th at
7:15.
7:15.
All in favor? Otto. And we will open public hearing for 777 Coy Hill.
Yeah, so this is, we'll get some wetlands to go over as well, so let's do that first, and we'll get to other. How was most of the changes are this one. Yeah, so that's actually works real well. Hey guys, I'm Evan Turner, representative of the applicant, ASD, what is this, Coy Hill, MA Solar LLC. Do we have any, I guess, for the public guys, ma'am, are you here for us, for the Coy Hill project?
No, I was here for them, but
Okay, well,
you're not too far, so I
Roger
figured I'd
that. Welcome to the
stay.
show.
I've got the
At
big
your
plate.
request, I made some copies for the
Oh my
audience.
gosh, all right.
Look at you.
A lot of
Did you request
apparently
that?
Go and take them home.
Feel free to take
read
two.
them.
Good fire
Good
starter.
They are fantastically boring. So, I guess to remind everyone to sort of up to speed on this project here, we're on the west side of Coy Hill, on the property of Mr. Fred Spain, which is in this northeastern corner. We're actually kind of middle of the site, top of the site here. These connect pretty well. Across the street from your previous application, but across from that giant wetlanded hill. You know, we're probably about half a mile away. What we were in front of you last time, we had our initial site plan made up in front of you and the planning board, but of course the planning board's on a pause while you guys do your diligence here. We had our third-party engineer talk to our engineer and our stormwater folks, our wetlands folks, to get a agreement on delineation.
Yep.
Third party went out there with our scientists as well, found a couple more spots, but overall I'm super happy with the consistency of it for something that is so large and can be rather, relatively complicated. We just found a couple more, and last week we had the emails that I think everyone's seen that we're all in
Yep.
agreement with the lines. The third party, your guys, rogered up to these plans. So the big two new ones are up here in the northwestern portion of the site. Just two new independent wetlands here that we're not assuming are isolated just because we're on the edge of a property line. So they just get the full size here 100-foot setback. They get the same treatment as before. We have a limit of work outside the 100-foot, and then a fence shortly thereafter, just like the rest of the array. Just like the rest of the wetlands around here. And a couple more, there were a couple spots where they had some small deviations that might, have a couple of, 5 extra flags or something along the otherwise delineated area. But otherwise, I'm really happy with how consistent it was, given the 100-acre, roughly size of this site. The other thing we had to talk about was, and the main thing I guess we're here for in the notice of intent, since we are otherwise staying out of the buffer zone, is our crossing here at the center south of the site on the east side. We discussed with you last time, it's a really short crossing. It's not much longer than that table. That is, effectively water has been channeled after the clearing operation some years ago. Looks like it started out as a rut for the logging trucks and the equipment, and sort of became a nice little wetland channel to this larger system up here. Keith and the third-party guy whose name I am Paul. There we go. And Dan. We got 3 of them out there. They all agreed like that's the wetland there is as depicted. It's a pretty short crossing. So we talked to last time a little bit about trying to find a spanning solution because it's not that long of a crossing.
Do you have something that we can see it?
I don't think we have a super zoom in of that
As
crossing, do we?
opposed, because right now it's just a big,
Yes, ma'am. I know. I don't think we have a giant blow up figure of that because it is
Yeah.
tiny.
Yeah, it's a 12
I-
4-foot wide crossing, yeah. No, I do not have a
So-
giant.
Right, I mean, that is something that we discussed the last time that you visited, and
Alright.
I also discussed that we did need additional information from Keith
On
Okay.
the replication
on the
information.
replication, yes.
I spoke to Keith regarding that. He said it was included in the original application.
There is information, it's a very lightweight version of the, okay, so we asked that you follow the guidelines, the wetland replication guidelines, and I did see that response. But what you submitted doesn't really cover all of the questions that the
Okay.
wetland replication guideline is asking for. They're asking for test pits, they're asking for a little more information about the replication area, it's a little more intensive than what we have. What we have is sort of like the Monarch Note version
Mhm.
of what we would be
Yeah.
looking for, which is fine for when you're not getting into the nitty gritty, but we wanna understand more about it. Again, understand that the wetland crossing is not a given going into the wetlands, and because we may issue, but the chances are we also may not issue it, we want as much information as we can get.
Yeah, I had spoken to Keith regarding that, and what Keith had said was that part of it was included, you know, and it was a lighter weight, but he also mentioned that if Paul needed additional information, he would work with him. He thought it might be a good idea instead of replicating, because it's such a small area, if there was a potential for the improvement of an area that the commission may have ideas on, where, because essentially it's it's a rut, and if there was an area where we could improve a better wetland and try to make new wetland area, that you guys might be, amenable of that. So essentially,
Is
instead
there
of trying to
somewhere-
make new areas, take an area that's degraded and enhance it to, if it happens to have,
Because I mean, we're talking about, I guess it's a 12-foot wide crossing that's a wheel rut, and there's, I guess, not to say there's nothing special about that specific wetland. It's just there from the
there might be
clearing
better
operations.
areas
But yeah.
to
So far as
improve it,
we-
like a
yeah.
full,
Instead of putting the remediation right here and it's just a bunch of scrub that isn't.
So we walked that, and it wasn't really scrub, it was just grass that was wet, and there were a couple of logs across it currently for.
Yeah, probably from where they used it when they crossed, they just threw the
So when
logs
they were
down.
logging it, they threw that down. It didn't seem totally degraded to us. I mean, it just
Okay.
seemed like an area that somebody had thrown some log, I've seen worse.
All right.
And you know what I'm saying? So the area, we had discussed, first of all, what are you gonna be doing there?
Yes, ma'am. So that was one of the things we talked about last meeting. We want to ideally span the whole distance, which would in theory prevent us, depending on your judgment, from needing to replicate if we didn't touch the wetland proper, if we spanned it from end to end. What we ran into on that, the challenge, was that we need something that a fire truck can roll over in 20 years confidently.
Right.
So that was a challenge from a crazy overbuild and more practical impact standpoint. And also going to the planning board and seeing the fire chief, like, we're gonna make this crossing and span it. We're pretty sure it's good through, 15 years, 10 years. What do we have to inspect? What is the cost and what is their comfort with it? And the bottom line for them is, aside from the wetland part, please just give us a gravel road. That's what everyone knows, it works, it's not gonna degrade, it's a gravel road. So that is what we've currently proposed, is a Gabion basket type gravel crossing with culverts underneath for that, again.
We have details on here, I guess maybe
No, we did, again, this, for us, the primary, we wanted to make sure everyone was on board with the delineation of the wetlands.
well, it would
And
be.
continue to talk with you regarding how, again, your best way that you guys would like to see it handled. Do you, Keith's idea of, enhancing areas that may be degraded worse,
Do you have any ideas?
not off, not
So-
offhand.
So,
Yeah, there aren't, I guess on this site, the question is where is it best? I guess if we follow my typical wetland replication, it's gonna be somewhere just like immediately downstream or upstream of the crossing. But it's only about 1,000 feet, even if you take multiples of our crossing width. I think that's a 2-to-1
Yeah, it's a little bit, I think it's like 480 square.
Yeah,
just
of
under
our,
500
of our total footage, and it's 1,000 feet, if you double it for the impact. And we can put it to the north or south if the commission has an opinion on where they'd like to see it. But, at that point, to replicate, now we're gonna just, dig down and create more wetland area. And, if you had a thought of where you'd like to see more wetland, perhaps like it'd be out of the way up here, or just, your thoughts. We don't expect, to plow forward in this meeting. We just want to, get together, confirm the lines, and talk about, really, the crossing is the item.
Well, I suppose it depends on what you are using to create the crossing. So what you're saying now is you want to do a gravel road.
Right, we have to assume that's the default, because I can't promise I can get anything else through the planning board for long-term, I guess, safety. That's a almost on target word.
Did you actually have a conversation with Chief LaVoy?
Early in the process we did, but we didn't cover all the nuances we've gotten to with us here before. A lot of those conversations I've had, like with our design guys and our engineers, about what they'd be comfortable putting in, because the same standard applies for their vehicles as well.
So, I'm not really sure what you're asking then.
So I guess, is there a scenario, I guess my ideal world is a pretty standard small wetland crossing. We can do it probably in gravel, because that's cost effective and I guess typical is the answer there, with culverts underneath to keep the water flow going. What I'd like to be able to, I guess, have as a condition of a prospective NOI is that if we can span that crossing fully without putting anything in the wetland, that we can not replicate, because that's a question for us. It's from a cost and process perspective, if no matter what we do we have to replicate, we will just be asking for a gravel road, because it won't be worth the cost and the expense of a steel span.
Ultimately, if you're able to span it and you're not touching the wetlands except for a small area,
and that'd be the buffer zone, like we'd stay in the buffer zone to cross.
then then you probably wouldn't have to do, right? I mean, if you're truly spanning it, then you're not putting in a culvert, you're not driving over, and then you wouldn't have to do the replication.
And that's not something we want to assume, because at any point where I'm physically over the wetland, I'm going to ask you guys for your opinion there. That's not an assumption we wanted to make before the meeting.
Yeah,
Right.
'cause if you're looking at it as the sun is blocked out and, so there's different commissions look at it different ways.
Right.
So we
looking
can't-
at here.
I mean, it's literally
12
12 feet
foot
wide.
crossing.
So I mean, we're looking at anything from like a tiny little prefabricated, steel item to a logging bridge, just logging mats. They're just 12 by 12 beams bolted together.
Yeah, but those would be in the, is that?
I mean, take one easy solution, pour a foundation on either side, and you used an arch, corrugated metal,
Yeah, that's
product.
totally what I was thinking. Somebody did that recently. A few years
and then
ago.
you fill over it with gravel, The other one that we were thinking, but it would fill, would be gabion baskets, and basically fill, to put two walls with two pipes that would allow hydraulic flow to move between it, and then, gabion baskets on either side, and do the crossing that way, basically backfill it with gravel, so that you have, but that's more,
Is it more invasive?
Correct.
Intrusive?
correct.
I mean, we still consider like the basket we like a little better because it's a little less squirrely. On does it settle over time? Do the rocks move on? You're not so much dumping gravel as building rock. A pathway across the wetland there with the culverts in between. But that's what we want to see if you guys had an opinion on that. I can't box myself into having to do a crossing because it's just so preliminary, both with the board and what the actual cost will be.
And not only, I mean, we're gonna have to go in there where the foundations are, which is basically on the edge of the wetlands, and dig test pits, which if I don't know how you're gonna look at that either.
We just have to consider its cost and functionality.
You can, and it's allowed.
It's allowed without even filing, that's testing.
Again, we're just trying to get, where you guys feel comfortable so that we can get, I mean, obviously, we feel this is the final, the final point. This is the big issue. We gotta get through this, and we wanna do it the right way for you guys.
Right.
Well, what ideas do you have if you're going to improve somewhere else? I don't think we've ever heard that before.
So, I mean, really, it's up to the commission what you guys can have us do. You could have us from nothing to a lot.
We could also get together with, obviously, the wetlands consultants who have now all walked the site.
Yep.
Now, there's 3 of them, and say, guys, you know, do you have an area that you feel can be enhanced? And that would be more valuable than replicating and get their opinion
Off
on
the
that.
top of my head, I might think something like, in here on this backside down the hill, where, the wetlands are relatively close but not quite together, would make sense from an area perspective, because it's not super useful for the solar part. We're not gonna be cutting into it, and it's relatively undisturbed, compared to the rest of the site.
And then what would you do there?
We'd have to get together with the wetland scientists and find out what they feel would make a better wetland, an enhanced wetland versus a replicated wetland. And
Well, a replicated wetland is actually enhancing, ultimately, it's enhancing and maybe enlarging an existing wetland
correct.
anyway, so it's ultimately the same thing.
Well, no, the problem is sometimes you're digging into an area that didn't want to be a wetland. So if you're in a wetland and say there's a whole bunch of, I don't know, for lack of a, one of them that Keith brought up was a farm dump
Yeah.
that
I've seen this
happens
all the
to
time.
be in a wetland. Removing the debris from that area and enhancing it, where we don't have to do it, per se.
Oh, I see, so instead of recreating and
Instead of
expanding,
making-
you want to maybe clean something up and, be a Boy Scout and clean it up instead of creating the
Yeah,
wetland.
or
If that's
add
what,
other-
if that's
I mean,
what,
that's
if that's what the
an
wetland
interesting idea.
scientists all agree would be better than trying to replicate 1,000 square feet, then we go in and clean up X number of square feet of degraded area where the wetlands want to be there.
Or add, species that improve the wetlands, because we have a fairly large acreage about that on site, and it's, I guess, it's still the scrub area, so it's got a lot of choice in what it's gonna become over time, especially as we lock this site down for 20 years. I guess part of what we want to discuss, the relative value of a generic 1,000 feet of digging down to make a wetland out of upland, vice what we can do with the rest of the site. One of the things AMP does on the upland side, for instance, in that mindset, we try to, we keep bees and, meadows and wildflower, because that's a nice way to use the property, as opposed to just generic meadows. I'm not a big fan of that wood chip idea they have for the other side, because it becomes a small little reserve. So what can we do that supports that, rather than just digging down to make the water level closer to the ground and make more wetland? In an area what the size of this room maybe is about, the total area.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not against the idea, it's an interesting idea, but I would like it well thought out, as opposed to, I walk this property, but I don't walk the whole site. It's a big site, and I just, that's why we hire a peer reviewer.
Yes, ma'am.
We wanted to see the crossings, so we went there with Mr. Spain. I'll have a conversation with GZA and see how they feel about it too. I think I'd like their feedback on this. I'm not.
Yeah, I think that's where I think we'd even like to see. That was something that Keith, when I asked him for more detailed information, he had said, he said, well, I had included it. And then we went down another road of, of spanning, and then we went down another road of, that. So essentially, we wanted to get your thoughts and then obviously go to the consultants that are wetlands experts and find out what they think would be best. Because, again, if we span it, but you guys say, well, you're keeping the openness ratio, that's great, but that's not a wetland anymore because you completely block the sun out so nothing can grow in it.
True.
So why not just fill it and then replicate? So before we went, down any roads, we just wanted to get what you guys as a commission.
Well, it's not. No, it's not. I mean, it's meadow.
It's meadow, it's a marshy
It's
meadow.
it's
not-
yeah.
It's not your typical beautiful wetland.
No, it's not.
So I don't.
So, again, the conversation that I would like to have with our peer reviewer would be this. I think I would prefer a span versus a gravel road, but maybe not. Do you guys always do this? This is very strange to me.
The span concept?
No, the concept of,
Giving us a choice.
giving us a choice and trying to figure it out along the way instead of coming up with a plan and giving it to
Part of
us.
it's preference of the board. You express, you guys are, your reputation is a relatively tough ConComm. A lot of them, yeah, I've worked with, if, like, for instance, I need to get to part of my site as crossing a wetland. Not that it's a given, but I mean, it's necessary to reach the site. The default assumption is a gravel road with some replication nearby, and that's just the sort of a stamped process because it is necessary to access the property. In this case, we don't have a way other way to get to the middle, but if, for instance, we look at some of its cost, if I have to replicate 1,000 square feet and then it's not the most natural wetland, I have to do it, then I have to maintain it, and if it fails, I have to keep redoing it.
Oh, yeah.
That can get expensive and annoying over time for an otherwise not wetland project.
Sure.
So
I mean,
the
that's
spa-
why we need
Yeah,
you
so
to
that's
do
why-
the homework to figure it
Well,
out.
normally, honestly, I would have come in, I would have said, it's a gravel road, here's a culvert, we're gonna replicate. But when we were in here in December, you had said, we really don't like that, what about spanning? So it changed it a little bit. Obviously, the client wants to make you happy, so he's trying to, find what makes you.
And
so
rarely
it's
do
not-
we have these short crossings. I mean, this is
Yeah,
12
this is-
feet. Like normally it's 30 or 40 or something. Otherwise, and you
Usually you're
know
looking
what you
at
have to
stable
do.
5,000
Mhm.
square feet, 500 is.
The only, filling it is fine, but do you think you're gonna find bottom?
Find the bottom of the.
I mean, it might just be junk all the way, you're gonna be dumping yards and yards and yards, because you're just gonna turn into mud.
Oh, with like pushing stuff in the relatively smushy soils.
It's pretty crappy, so, you're gonna have to, if you do go that route, you're gonna wanna take some,
You're gonna have.
you
Yeah.
gotta see, you might have to fill it with stone or something,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you could just, even stones could just
Yeah.
keep disappearing, you know
Well,
what I mean?
that's
So it
kind-
might end up being better off spanning it, you got, until you
Yeah.
see what's there.
Yeah, there's more homework that definitely needs to be done, but, getting a little bit of guidance just helps us to try to determine the best way to attack it from your, what you guys would prefer to see.
I mean, I don't think we'd have a problem with covering with a span, we wouldn't be considering losing wetland, would we? And that little bit,
Most commissions don't, I think
there's
it's-
nothing there,
I mean, there's grass. There isn't. It's wet. It's wet.
it's just wet.
I mean,
It's not-
the thing that I was concerned about wasn't losing the wetland, it was losing the hydraulic connection.
The water flow,
Connection,
yeah,
yeah.
from the.
That's what I was initially,
Right,
based
because
on walking there,
If you lose that, it's gonna spread out and it's just gonna,
was just losing it, right, exactly. That's what I was initially concerned with, because when we did walk out there, it was field, meadow, whatever, but the hydraulic connection would be blocked.
Mhm.
And I would rather see the hydraulic connection exist
Yep.
than the meadow underneath it.
Roger, and that's, when we were looking at that, the gravel crossing, I think we had, our preliminary design was 2 culverts over the distance.
We're at 2 now, I think it
Yeah.
had been 1.
One original, like 2 with the gabions on each side of them. And then
Correct.
you more or less fill from gabion to culvert, And those are, sort of half-buried larger pipes, or larger culverts.
You can do a larger pipe and half bury it if it was a stream bottom that you were trying to maintain some sort of,
well, I don't think you're gonna have a stream bottom.
You're not gonna have a stream bottom,
No.
so that's why,
It just makes them
the
It just makes it a
span-
little larger, if you can.
Sure,
So that was, again, trying to make sure the hydrology is never threatened.
yeah.
That was the creative way to get a bigger opening without having to go to, some steel span across
Oh, I see,
the
right.
site. That's one or the other. We're not looking at, I guess, our goal is not to put down the standard, like, thin gravel road and just, put a little 1-foot culvert in there and, call it good.
Yeah,
There's a bit more water there than that in the rainy seasons, and I don't think it's reasonable to expect it to be just as wet in the future years as it was this year. We got to build it for 20+, so that's not really a shortcut we're looking for.
So let me ask you about these plans,
Mhm.
just to be clear, the black heavy dotted line around is 100 foot from the, 100 foot
From the
setback?
wetland.
Yes, ma'am,
Yes,
a
that's
100 foot from the property line
From the
are
property
these.
lines.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And these are the same 100 foot, yeah, the
You're
same
right, yeah.
theme,
It's
100
the
foot
same-
from the
okay,
wetland.
all
Yes,
right, and then you have the thinner dotted line that's directly underneath Warren and it goes around, and that is your,
ma'am. Limit
tree
of clear
cuttings?
clearing. Yes.
Yeah, limits of clearing.
So we've left, a sort of
So
more
I
or less a
just-
vegetative strip around the outside.
I am going to point out that
Mhm.
that will probably not fly with planning. You have your own conversation, but,
Mhm.
we have a 100 foot, it's kind of, what is it? It's a 100 foot setback and
Natural vegetative buffer,
of
something like
150
that.
feet.
So the 150 is for properties in residential use, and it's 100 for properties that aren't in residential use.
And
So
the-
surrounding, none of these properties actually, except for,
They're not in residential.
they're not,
use.
except for this one over here.
Are you sure?
Uh,
Okay, I
But yes,
just,
ma'am, that's
yeah.
something we discussed with the
Well,
planning
that was
board
the-
on
wasn't
first
that in the
intro.
original bylaw?
well, we only have one bylaw, one solar bylaw. Okay, I just, all right, okay.
And those are just some of the features, like over here, like this is like Massachusetts owned like conservation land. So that there's no
Oh, you know,
functional
that's
neighbor
the
and that
cell
kind of.
tower. Is that the cell tower?
Cell tower's right over here.
Oh.
So like our property, like we've got a lot of, I guess, neighbors, but none of them are terribly using most of the land.
Right.
You know, the neighbors on this guy, if this is what, top to bottom here, there we go, this is kind of top to bottom.
Yeah,
The neighbors are all over here,
and what about on this side?
nothing. It's a giant downhill all the way to Town Farm Road. The neighbors are the better part of half mile away.
Oh, the
Down-
houses are?
Yeah, down, all the way down, this hill just keeps going.
Okay,
For a better part of 100 feet of elevation. And, I think this parcel is 80, 90 acres, just right here, all the way down the hill. There's zero ability to have any functional neighbors unless someone starts building houses at the top of that hill,
right,
which is challenging and probably a wetland.
probably a
Yeah.
wetland, right, exactly. Okay, all right, yeah, well, I just, when I saw that, I'm like,
So that's the
you're gonna
trick.
get stopped and it's gonna change again.
Yeah, well, that's the trick, talking, we stay out of the 100-foot buffer.
Yeah.
Because that keeps us clean. And then we'll talk, if, like, for instance, something I would ask the board in their discretion, if this is completely conserved land with never a neighbor ever, like, I might wanna use some of this, if that's, a give and take. Because it's, if that buffer is to protect neighbors in the community.
Well, that's definitely a planning
Yeah,
question,
just
for
that
sure.
kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
that's what would change, nothing relative to our jurisdiction in this crossing.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
gotta get solid. So I think the homework we've got now, we'll dig more into the crossing concept with a span. And if I can get, the real trick is it gonna be cost effective and practical? I can't go spend, $200,000 on a crossing, in the middle of the woods, or used to be woods. To try to avoid that, there's gotta be some cost effectiveness there for me. But I do wanna avoid impacting the wetlands,
Yeah,
and I do wanna avoid the cost of replication, that is kind of shoehorning it in there because we have to.
all right, so let me just take a look at. Well, they're really, is this it? This is it.
That's it.
That's it.
It wasn't bigger than this, huh? That's
No,
kind of
it's,
fascinating.
12-foot crossing.
Well, it's not even, I mean, the wet didn't go further in either direction.
well, it goes north or east and west. I mean, it expands to the east, and it's pretty skinny.
Where's,
So-
okay, north, okay. All right, so east,
So in between the blocks is the wetland. The blocks get a little big here.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, so they run just down and
Yeah, so
skinny.
basically, yeah, so you're 10, you're running in between each one of these.
And then what about on this side?
Widens up a bit.
Oh, it gets wider.
Yeah, so
So-
D8 and 9, D7.
So this is what I'd like you to do, if you can. Can you take this,
Blow it way up.
Blow it up.
this section right here?
Yes, ma'am.
Blow it up and email it?
Yes.
Can you do that?
Yes.
Because that would help a
Yeah.
lot to be
Yeah,
able to
we'll put it
even
at,
have a
probably put it at
conversation.
like 10 scale. You know, some-
Ideal.
Yeah, something where
Ideal,
you.
something where we can see it, so we can see what happens a little east, a little west of it, and
Not a problem.
a little north and south, but mostly what's on east and west.
Yeah.
Just so we have an idea of what it looks like, where the wetlands are, and
Fair
they're not overtaken by giant squares.
Yes,
Yeah.
at that scale, it looks like squares.
That would be good, and that would help, help us with the conversation.
Okay. And then we'll get you that, I'll try to get you that tomorrow.
Okay, that would be good.
And then, so, I guess the only question I have, similar to these guys, the previous guys exiting, I think largely our conversation is down to just the crossing and the style of it and any replication around it.
Well, that's pretty much,
Yeah,
we're
that's
still
the-
in the same spot, so we haven't really moved forward except for this.
Yeah, I mean,
We,
The
once we.
wetlands are agreed to, that.
The
wetland
wetlands are agreed to,
lines.
the wetlands are great.
Okay.
The wetlands are agreed to, so now we just need to figure out what, you need to figure out what you wanna do
and propose it firmly.
and propose it firmly.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's, I guess, is that a point in which you're willing to give us the same reference to the planning board that we're down to this, sort of this point and we can start talking about the rest of the site? Because, I mean, it's gonna be a big, with the planning board, it's everything.
It is a lot. What I will tell them is that we have absolutely no idea what we're doing over there on that section, but everything else, the wetlands, the delineations are fine.
Perfect.
Okay, I can do that. And remind me to email the planning board too, please.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And, and if they wanna take us, to start with, or they wanna shelve us with those other guys, that's fine, but I would like if we, we're gonna have, 6 meetings anyway, and we've got plenty to talk about.
Yeah.
We don't have to focus down on that one for the first meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
that's-
they'll make a decision on whether or not they'll move ahead, but yeah, I'll send a note.
Thank you very much, guys, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Can I just have you sign in?
Yes, ma'am.
I did.
Yeah, I did not.
I was first, I was
Yeah,
with
he was
you.
the early one.
I was the first one in, other than you
Somebody was
guys.
here early.
Well, I'm happy we're not quite as complicated as the other ones.
Uh-huh.
So are they on for 7:30 on the 13th then?
Oh, yes, so can I have a motion to continue the public hearing for March 13th at,
Want to give them a different time?
give them 5 more minutes, 7:35.
7:35?
A motion to continue the hearing for something.
This is yours, I don't know how to make it collapse.
7:35 on March
13th.
Second? All in favor? You didn't add the RDA on the agenda?
It's like the rest, this is the only parcel
Put me on the agenda.
We need to,
So,
on this agenda, we post the RDA. Yeah,
Mass Highway.
Mass Highway?
When was that supposed to be posted?
And then of course we have a
when did you
natural
get it?
buffer, because the wetlands bylaw says we don't screw with the buffer more or less.
Oh, you know what, we didn't get it after this meeting.
I know already, so it's
Okay,
not like it's
never mind.
pristine,
Then we don't
forest
have
that's
to
been
worry
built
about
years
We have,
ago.
I have it
So
here.
this is the one,
all
that
right.
is like right over here.
Yes, right,
These are the other
We'll put
houses
it on the
here.
next agenda?
But this is
All
the
right.
buffer
And-
property, these are the cell towers. I think
That
some
would
of
every
them are
time.
Right here on the road, but it's in this
RDA
little
for
road
90,
here, it's like in a postage
I-90.
stamp lot.
Yeah.
But it's a different owner, this is all, it's not the
Right,
same.
correct, yeah, yeah.
And that's DEP land.
Fix this.
This guy is here, there's no house on this
Right,
property.
right,
It's
right.
there,
Specialist.
these are vacant,
Hammer
that's, doesn't host a house oddly enough, because, no it does, but this is the applicant's house, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Fred's house is down here.
That's right here on this piece of.
Well,
there.
the whole
So,
idea is
that's
not
what
to
we
do it
drive
right
by.
there.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
So
the whole
it's,
idea
you
is
know,
to do a
oddly, it's pretty much
replication
100
next
feet all the way
to a
around.
wetland that is fabulous somewhere on the site.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, the reason I'm asking
Or
the question is, so
what
I
he's
actually
proposing is
own-
let's not
I
do
actually
the
own
replication
this
at all,
piece
let's
of
go
land.
clean up a piece of crap.
And this is my neighbor.
Are you kidding me?
And I'm
Did you
actually
see that?
right now
You know?
purchasing these 2 pieces of land.
Okay.
Come on, he's
And I'm
a
actually
farmer,
just
he,
purchasing this piece of
he,
Gotcha.
like has a bunch of
So
rusted
that
equipment
would-
in a,
So if I purchase it after.
in something, but then the wetland
then
is
your
probably a piece of crap
Yeah,
now
we-
and it needs
Well, we're
to be.
grandfathered now.
Right, right,
You get the
right.
rules you apply under, that's
Put it
what
out,
we're
then
current.
replant it.
And it's not a thing, I mean,
This
50
is all
feet, I don't wanna give
right?
up randomly 50 feet, but
Yeah.
you're also talking about the depth here.
Right, right, yeah.
Of the,
Yeah, so this shouldn't be
yeah.
any issue, yeah.
No, even this like being mostly
No.
cleared.
No, it was like-
It's still like
Wetland
these
plants,
houses, you can't see anything, I mean, I've been out
And
there
then
like
they
in the
put,
winter.
you know, they have,
And standing
it's
here
not even
looking back, you're
corduroy,
like,
but they
Yeah,
put some,
They put,
Yeah.
like you just,
well, they put
it's just
logs
too,
across
it's the
same
distance.
way as burying
Yeah,
themselves
okay,
in the
perfect.
So
skin.
that's why we like this site, you know,
Yeah,
it's pretty tucked away, it's
Right,
size
right,
acres.
It's west, I mean,
Yeah,
it's.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, yeah,
They had to take the
going this
cows
way.
out of there.
What
because
time
the
was
cows-
that RDA?
The conversation.
after,
Cows.
let's give these
Yeah,
guys.
I mean,
That's pretty bad.
when we went
Thank
up
you,
there, it
everyone.
was, see you
All
later,
right, thank
thanks.
you.
When we went up there, it was
Yeah,
really
let's
cold,
just-
Seven fifty-five?
and there was
Sure.
holes like this deep where there's cows.
And is that a meeting
The
or a
whole
hearing?
field was just like,
That is, an
Irritated
RDA is
with
a
it.
public meeting.
poor bastards, their hoofs must have been packed solid with, oh
Wow,
my
I mean,
god.
that's-
And
look
then
at that.
cold
When were they coming
freezing.
back for them?
It's,
They're coming back on
And
the
that wasn't in
thirteenth,
the-
Oh, 13th, yeah.
that
our
was the
next
field.
meeting, along with,
As far as woods,
yeah, the other one.
because nobody can.
Cutler Road.
Yeah, and what'd you do for them,
Couldn't work.
7:30?
Couldn't work it.
For the
Seven
time?
thirty-five.
7:35?
Perfect, all right.
Brush and bramble and trees and, you know,
And it was
it's-
still seven.
it's for-
Yeah, perfect, okay.
I'm, you know, these guys do.